Hey everybody, this is Matt. Welcome back to the channel. And today's video, I realized that last few videos have been kind of interior stuff, and this one's going to be somewhat interior related, but not really. I have made a decision on what I want to do with the mirrors on the FD. So they are off the car right now, but we'll go over to the workshop and I'll show you what I've decided to do with that. The car's been running great. I took it to Cars and Coffee yesterday, and then took it for a cruise afterwards, and everything went well. I'll also give you a little bit of a sneak peek of something else that I picked up recently that will probably be one of the next videos. I have sourced another 13B REW. Now it's a little bit of rough shape, but I did get a good deal on it, so I think we're gonna have some options with this one. But I wanted to go ahead and mention that to look out for that video coming out soon. We'll do the teardown and figure out exactly what we need to do and what we've got here. I have no history on the motor other than the guy that sold it to me. He didn't really know much about it either, just that it came from a wrecked FD. Anyway, let's go head over to the shop and I'll show you what we're doing with these mirrors. For those that are new or need a refresher, my FD came with Ganadors, and from the markings and the stamps, they seem to be authentic. I don't really have any other information on them. I have been driving around with one Ganador on and one factory mirror on, just to kind of see which one I ultimately would like. Everybody take a deep breath, and I will be putting the factory mirrors back on the car, at least for now. So I'll probably just set these aside and maybe clean them up. It looks like some of the hardware needs to be replaced. It was difficult to get these on and off, and I think partly because I don't think it has the original hardware and the weather seal and stuff on it. So what I may do is take these apart some other day and clean them up. I've got a black left-hand mirror and a Montego blue right side mirror, and these came from a left-hand drive car. I did put them on there, and at least from my driving angle and my position in the driver's seat, the left-hand drive right side mirror just doesn't bend out enough. But also I've noticed that the motor on this mirror clicks, so I'm not even sure if it's maybe the motor is is not letting it bend out. I did go ahead and order a set of new mirror lenses from Japan. Today what I want to do is go ahead and get these taken apart. I've never done this before, but I've done some research to kind of get an idea of what I'm looking at. And it looks like we got to heat the mirror glass up, pop these off, and then there's a bunch of screws that will let the internal pieces come out. Once I've done that, I'll get them sanded down, and we'll go ahead and get them painted. I'm not going to color match the car right now, but at least I want to get these both looking the same, so at least it looks intentional for the time being. When I picked these mirrors up, I did get one set of the hardware. The little Phillips head screws that kind of connect the trim down to the car and then connect the mirror to that. I have sourced new because ultimately these Phillips heads just rust out, they strip, and really to me I'd rather try to use something else. So I've gone with some Panhead M6 hardware. You're basically going to need a 12 millimeter, a 16 millimeter, and then a 20 millimeter. If you can find them in stainless or whatever, but I couldn't find the 12s. So I just went with typical automotive hardware, and they'll potentially rust out over time, but I'll keep my eye on them and maybe spray these black just to give them a little more protection. These have the hex head drive, so they'll be much easier to get in and out and not have to worry about stripping out in the future. So I will be replacing with the factory hardware with those. First step in this process is going to be removing the mirror glass. It already looks like either someone has replaced it in the past, because it's already kind of sticking outside the plastic trim. I'll go ahead and heat this up and then slowly get a pry tool in behind there and see if I can pop this glass out. And I will just use a hair dryer starting out, because I don't want to get this plastic super hot. This one seems to be original, and the glass is really tucked down inside there. My understanding is once we get the glass off, there'll be a screw or two in there. It'll kind of let that assembly pop out. So I put on some gloves in case the glass does break and I don't get glass in my hand. I'm going to use a plastic kind of trim pry tool at first and see if I can work my way around. If this has been replaced, I have no idea what the person that replaced this, if they used epoxy, if they used double-sided tape, so who knows what I'll be able to figure out. But I will go ahead and apply some heat, and then we'll see if we can start prying this mirror out. So overall, it does seem like it's wanting to pry away, but I mean, I'm really having to put a lot of force in driving this this trim tool in there. So I think what I'm gonna do is, oh man, that makes me real nervous. All right, so I've got my trim tool about as far as I can get in there, at least with the thin part of it. And it's pried up about 1/4 of an inch on that side, but it's really not doing anything anywhere else. So I'll keep applying heat. I mean, it feels relatively warm. Actually, if I hold my hand on there long enough, it kind of hurts. So I think I'm getting it hot enough with the hair dryer, but we'll continue to add some more heat, and I'll see if I can keep kind of working this around. So now that I have the glass kind of pried out, I did look down, and from what it looks like to me is that there is some epoxy. It doesn't really seem like it's coming loose. I have it about 1/2 inch separated on this side, and I think it's really just, like I said, that I can smell the heat coming off that adhesive that's in there, so I definitely think it's working. So you can kind of see what I'm dealing with, hopefully on the camera. It's just filled with all kinds of goop, but it's responding to the heat well, and there you go. So it looks like for sure this was some sort of repair that was done, or a replacement that was added. Hopefully you don't run into that same problem. Now that we got access, hopefully we can take that screw out and the rest of this will come apart. I'll just show you a few seconds of me trying to get this edge pried up, because like I said, this is more of an OE condition where the glass is actually tucked back into the mirror body. So I'll try to see if I can get this heated up and then try to get this glass popped out. I think with this one being probably an original mirror, it just has this double-sided tape. So that was pretty simple to kind of get that pried under there. So now that I've got a little bit of pressure pushing against the back side of the glass, I'm gonna go ahead and heat this up really well, and then hopefully this will just peel off. So that came off tremendously easy. This was also a much thinner glass, so I'm wondering, again, someone probably had a piece of glass cut. That almost looks like a piece of glass that you would use for your house. I would think you would definitely need a tool very similar to this, very thin, and can kind of angle it and get in there. So happy we got through that, because it didn't break anything, and maybe I can resell these or something for somebody else that needs them. Now I do have a bunch of goop I've got to get cleaned off. I will go ahead and turn the camera off and start to clean up this mess, but I'll pick the camera back up when we go to disassemble the mirrors. I got enough of the goop off so that I could get to access to the screw, and I have loosened it. So you just have a Phillips head screw and a spring that come out of the center. And I did try to pull on this earlier, and I heard some clicking sounds. And I think what happened is these little, they're kind of threaded plastic. They pulled out of this. It does specifically say left-hand drive, right-hand side. So the plastic must be different from a left-hand drive to right-hand drive car. The lenses that I've got are for a right-hand drive car, so we may just have to make a slight adjustment on, being able to kick these out a little bit. Really, I wouldn't need to do anything else, because I just need to, tape this off and paint it. But for completeness sake, and anybody else that has to do this in the future, I will go ahead and remove these screws. So it looks like you probably have to clip the wires in order to get the motor completely out. But again, there's a left-hand drive, right-hand side marker on this. I'm not going to take this fully apart because I don't want to have to worry about splicing these wires. But I will leave this apart for now, because I do want to go ahead and get all this cleaned out. It does look like if I wanted to take off this outer beauty trim ring, there are 4 screws. So there you go. So if you needed to, either replace this part or take it off to paint it, which I might go ahead and leave this off as well. So when I do my painting, it'll just help with taping these off. So 4 Phillips head screws. So I'll get the other one disassembled, and then we'll start cleaning all this spider webs and junk out of these. I have both mirrors disassembled now, and This side obviously was basically the exact same thing. The thing I did conclude why this mirror was all bound up, and it looks like when they push all that adhesive or epoxy or whatever it was down in there, this little mechanism is supposed to pivot, and mine's filled with that goop. So that's why I was getting, it just wouldn't, the mirror, I thought the motor was bad, but I think it's just the mirror. So once I get all that stuff cleaned out, I think that'll fix that problem. If you wanted to be complete about this, then obviously you'd have to snip these wires or take these apart, and then you could, there's a couple more screws down here that you could pull the whole assembly out, and then of course this metal bracket just has one more screw right there. This is going to be good enough for me. I can clean up what I need to clean up and then tape it off for the painting process. Cleaning and then wet sanding, anything that needs to be painted, that'll be what's next. Yeah, that went much easier than I thought it was going to. I was really afraid about that glass. Anyway, I'm gonna get this cleaned up and I'll check back in. Everything is now painted. I just used 2 or 3 coats of a black matte enamel. I did sand the mirrors down. I wet sanded them to get them smooth, but there are, nicks and scratches in the mirror. I didn't do any body filler work or anything like that on these because eventually they will get redone, whenever we paint the car. These were a little bit rusty. These are the internal pieces. So I went ahead and sprayed them with some rust preventative primer. And I even took the fasteners, cleaned them all up, and let them soak in a rust preventative. I did need to pick up some new mirror glass, so I reached out to Zoom Engineering. They are a company based in Japan, and they sent me right-hand drive mirror lenses, which these are convex mirror lenses, so they actually have a wider field of view anyway, and they've got a little bit of a blue tint, but they do have a wider field of view than a normal lens. So left-hand drive, right-hand drive are mirror images of each other. There's not like one that's flat and one that's convex. They weren't cheap, so I want to be very careful about how I install those. So that's why I really like the idea of the adhesive that was used on the factory mirror, because it seems to release really well with heat. I have been trying to track something down like this and haven't had very good luck. If anybody knows exactly what kind of product that is, please let me know, because that's the way to go with this mirror, because it just releases the glass so easily. I did find some flexible silicone adhesive. It's probably not going to work the same way. I'm going to try to scrape as much as I can off the factory mirror and reuse that, but I will put probably a couple dabs of this just in locations where I know that I might be able to reach in there and scrape it off. And I'm sure this pamphlet that's all in Japanese tells me exactly what I need to do, but of course I can't read it. I'll go ahead and reassemble everything, and I'll check in when we're ready to go mount these in the car. Relatively straightforward to put these back together. The last thing I want to do is, there is a kind of a socket that goes on the back of the mirror bracket, and it rides and kind of pivots in the center of the motor. There's multiple pieces that accomplish that, but mine were dry. There was maybe just a smidge of grease down in there, but I'm going to go ahead and just put a light coating of lithium grease on this part as well as this part, so that once it's all back together and the motor's moving, it's just a little bit less resistance for it to catch. So then the last part is to put in this little kind of bearing, the spring, and the screw. So I'm just going as snug as they'll go without over tightening them. I'm not 100% sure at what point they really need to be. Anyway, I will run these out to the car real quick and test them out. I never got the boots on this mirror to fully seat like I could on these, and I think that's more or less a function of being old, tired, rubber boots that just are they're soft and they don't really hold up very well. For now, I'll go ahead and grab the mirrors. So as you can see, there's there's some double-sided tape. Now what I may do is just peel a little bit back to kind of see where these are gonna hit. Now they are gonna stick out of the plastic, unfortunately, just because the OEM mirrors, actually sit down inside the plastic. So these are not gonna be perfect fits. They're gonna be very close, but they're not perfect. So like you can kind of see there's gonna be some little bit of exposed lip there, and that's probably just the difference of the left-hand drive and right-hand drive brackets, but for the most part they fit. So this one, I'll just go ahead and kind of temporarily place it in there. So that is actually just kind of held in there because there's a little bit of a lip around that bracket, so it's just being held in there right now. There's no adhesive or anything holding it in there, but as you can see, and it's upside down, but there's quite a bit of gap. I don't know if that's a function of how Zoom Engineering cuts their mirror glass, or if that's just the difference between left-hand drive and right-hand drive mirrors. But what I'll do is make sure that when I install it, that there isn't a gap at the top. That will helpfully stop water and stuff from getting down and behind the mirror. For now, I'm just gonna go test and see how close it is, just like this. So I apologize if the camera sounds a little loud. I'm trying to hold this close to my seating position so that we can kind of gauge what the mirrors look like. So this one, I have it already kind of play with it, and it is far out as it will go. So I'm not sure if you can hear that clicking, but it is as far as it will go. And it's not a bad angle. And actually the camera is seeing more than what I can actually see. So I would say it definitely needs to be tilted out a little bit more. Passenger side is very similar. So that side has plenty of adjustability. I don't know if you can hear it, but one thing I am realizing is that it does not have up and down control. So I'm gonna have to look at the wiring harness and figure out what's going on with that. It's just likely a loose wire or something. I think that one's gonna be totally fine. Just go ahead and install it the way it is, but I do need to figure out what's going on with that wiring harness. This one I do need to play with a little bit. I can adjust it up and down, but I do need to try to get it angled out a little bit further. So I'll go ahead and pull these back off and take them into my workshop, and then we'll try to go ahead and get the adjustment on this one, and then go ahead and get that one installed because it's done. See if I can figure out about the wiring harness, and then these will be good to go. I've been doing some troubleshooting trying to figure out why the vertical motor on the left-hand side mirror is not operating. I did hook up my power supply just to test that the motor itself is actually working. So there's three, more or less three wires that come into this connector. So if you basically use a positive and negative on your DC power supply, which you could test this out in the car too, I suppose, but off a car battery, but I just got nails to be able to reach in there. But if I touch each one of these, so I don't know if you could see that, and if you reverse it, so the motor in the mirror is fine, which is unfortunate and a good thing, I guess, because I don't have to replace the mirror. But I have spent some time digging through the wiring harness, and the best I can conclude, there's an issue with the body wiring harness. It doesn't seem to be an issue with the door itself, the short piece of wiring that goes from the connector through the door. And I haven't quite dug through all the connectors on the switch, but the switch seems to operate fine. So I don't think it's the switch itself that's going to be the problem. So I think somewhere between the left-hand side door and the right-hand side door, the harness that runs across the dash, there's got to be a wiring issue. I've traced it back as far as I can. I can't find it. So that really kind of sucks, but it's really not a big deal because you can still set the mirror, and it's not like you need to fiddle with them all that much anyway. And I'm certainly not going to take the dash back out of the car at this point in time to try to trace all that wiring down. So I've got the primary issue will be adjusting, horizontal, which that works. And I'll try to check the wires one more time when I do the final installation of all this stuff. So that means I need to go ahead and adjust this mirror. This mirror. And I think I've got some solutions on how to do that without, doing anything too janky. Let me clean some of this up and I'll show you what I got in mind. So one option that you certainly could do to adjust the angle of this frame is to just kind of glue the glass in there. And I know a lot of people are just going to go ahead and say, well, you just get a right-hand drive mirror and you'd be done with it. And you're right. You know, these mirrors aren't super expensive. I think a used pair is running for about 200 bucks right now. If you're like me and trying to save money where you can, and these mirrors work fine otherwise, it's just this one small issue and I think it'll be fine. So what I'm going to do is pop this frame back out, and then the motor kind of mounts flat inside the body. What I'm going to do is it's got 2 screws on each side. On the side over here, just to angle this out, I'm going to put a spacer. I don't need a whole lot, and I'm thinking that, you know, these are some nylon nuts. I've got some well nuts that I could cut in half. You could use a piece of plastic. You could use washers, but I would definitely recommend using something that won't corrode, stainless steel or something. So I've got a couple options here, but first thing I need to do is pop this frame back out. After taking this apart, I realized that 3 of the screws are plenty long, that you could add, you know, a few washers or a spacer pretty easily without having to do it, you know, anything different. But on the bracket that mounts it into the body of the mirror, there, you know, 3 of the corners have a standoff, and then one side doesn't, and that one side is right here. And so when you put the screw in, it doesn't project very far. So I did go find a matching screw type that was longer, and so I will reuse that for now, and it will project above the body of the motor, but that's going to be okay because the mirror is generally angled out this way anyway. I decided I am going to use the nylon nuts as my spacers just because they're not going to compress like the rubber will, and so I did sand them down a little bit at a slight angle to kind of help with you know, not put so much pressure on a single point on the plastic. So I'll try to set all this together with the spacers in place. Okay, I'm not going to put those on too tight because I do need to get this side down and get it screwed in so that it's flush. I'm not going to crank those too tight because I don't want to put too much, I don't want to bend the housing, the motor housing too much. That is just angling that whole motor out just enough, and I think it's going to be fine for what we need. I do need to go ahead and put this back in, and then we can go ahead and install the glass and get these back in the car. So after debating for a while how I was going to attach the glass back to the frame, I just decided there was enough of that goo, whatever it is. I'm not sure what that is. It's some sort of sticky stuff. There was enough of that on this factory mirror that I was able to spread it out amongst the 2 mirrors, and I feel like that's going to be plenty. And I'll use the double-sided tape that came on the mirrors, and actually I doubled the thickness of the double-sided tape in the center just to kind of give the center of the glass some support. So I had thought about shaving down some of these little nubs to kind of get the glass to fit a little bit better, but as you can see with this mirror, you know, I can actually tuck it in around the lip of the plastic pretty easily. And what I'll do is, once these are both together, I'll get my hair dryer and heat them up really hot just to make sure that this adhesive really kind of sticks, and I'll press everything in and make sure that it's nice and secure. What I'll do is I'll pop this in, and then that should wrap everything up. I'll clean them up, and then we'll get them put on the car. What I found getting these glass lenses back in is to you know, get the top in and kind of push it towards, you know, what would be the car side of the mirror. And then if you have a thin trim tool, you can kind of work the edges and get the last of the frame of the glass down inside the frame. Now that it has adhesive, it's going to be a little bit tougher. When it didn't have adhesive, you could kind of slide it around. So there's just a little bit of overlap. So let's see if we can go ahead and try to, and again, you don't want to put too much force, but you know, I don't know if you heard that kind of click over, and then just kind of make sure that that's in there too. And that's in there. Yeah, so there it is, all put back together. So the last thing I'll have to do is get my heat gun on these. Next time you see these will be back on the car, but for now, I'll get these cleaned up and I'll see you guys in a second. Putting the mirrors back on is going to be relatively straightforward. I like to go ahead and put this little kind of trim piece back on before I put the mirror on, and then I just feed the cable through the door. And then you basically have to orient there's a screw hole there and a screw hole here. So just the way I took this off, that'll go there. So then you've got a shorter screw, and I've replaced mine with a hex drive so that they're easy to remove in the future. So I'll snug that down just enough to hold it. The next thing you want to do is flip this the opposite way. And then I'll go ahead and just bring this back around and cinch this one down a little bit more. And that's it. So the last thing we would need to do is make the electrical connection down inside the door, but I'm gonna go ahead and grab the passenger side mirror and get it installed, and then I'll deal with both of them at the same time. So I know the purists are probably happy and everyone else is pissed that I took the Ganadors off, but for me, I really just like the lines of the stock mirrors. And I know some people say they stick out and whatever, but to me, they just they follow the swoop of the car. And of course, mine are not paint matched, so they would look much better if they were paint matched, but the black will get us by for now until we do more body work and get the car repainted. I obviously am gonna have some discrepancies in the paint where the Ganadors were left on the car when it was painted originally. The Ganadors almost kind of looked short and stubby to me, and don't get me wrong, I mean, I really like them, they look good, but for me, I think this is the way I want to go. I've had multiple people ask me if I would sell the Ganadors, and I'm certainly open to the idea. They would definitely need a little TLC to be in good shape. So I've had plenty of people ask me for them. I've got a long list, so I'll just go ahead and answer that now because I'm sure people will reach out to me about it. So the wiring harness for the mirrors is pretty obvious. It comes straight down from the mirror, and it has this kind of triangle shaped connector. It's the only one that's like that in the door, so you're not going to mess that up. I do need to finish the door speaker installation, so I have that. That's pretty much the next thing. It'll just bolt in. I do want to test all that out before I get the door cards on, but with that, I will be able to put the door cards on, and that'll complete this interior restoration. So I know it's been a long process and lots of videos, and hopefully it's helped a bunch of you guys that are, you know, doing this in your car. I do have a few goodies from Garage Alpha and some others that just, you know, finish up the interior, but those aren't really, those are just plug and play kind of things. I don't have to do a whole lot of work for those. So anyway, interior's looking good. I really like these mirrors. I know that's not going to be the popular opinion on here, but for me, those are going to be the best thing for now. So that's going to wrap this up. But before I go, you know, the world's kind of a crazy place right now. We have a lot going on with coronavirus and just things that are happening all over the world. So I did want to take a second to say, you know, I'm thinking about everybody and hope everybody's doing well. You know, it's kind of crazy what we're going through. I am fortunate that for the most part, I am able to continue working. I do have to work from home now, but I can do enough through online stuff that I'm able to at least keep working at this time. Now, if they go ahead and shut down everything, then of course I won't be able to do that. And I'm sure it's been significantly worse for a lot of people losing their jobs and things like that. So it is kind of a bummer. We'll all get through it, and then hopefully when all this is over, you know, we'll all be better for it in some way. But it is tragic what's happening. Anyway, if you guys have been impacted directly by everything that's going on, or have any questions about the car, projects, anything about me, whatever, please leave that down in the description below, and I'll try to respond back to everybody. I do have some projects on the back burner that I can continue to work on, but I'm probably not going to be buying a bunch of parts and tools and things like that with everything that's going on. So my next video is probably going to be the teardown of that other 13B that I've got. I just want to find out what condition it's in and see what's salvageable, what's not. If it's in good shape, then we might start rebuilding that, and that might be the motor that we swap back into the FD when it comes time to do that. That'll probably be more interesting than doing the finishing up the audio system in the car. As always, I really appreciate you guys watching, and I sincerely hope that everyone is doing well, as well can be. I know it's a tough time for a lot of people, and it seems frivolous to be out building cars and making car videos and things like that, but I at least hope it gives you guys a few minutes of not thinking about everything else that's going on in the world. So anyway, thank you guys, and I'm going to see you in the next one.